All right. Now, I said there was one contribution by modern money theory that was new, where you do not find it until modern money theory. Every other idea that we have that is comprised of modern money theory, I think you can find it. Someone else already expressed it somewhere. A lot of the ideas you can find expressed 200 years ago, so they're definitely not new. They're very old ideas. The views of government spending, those are very old ideas. Okay, but there is one that I don't think you will find anyone ever expressed it before, and that is Warren Mosler, who was a hedge fund manager, and he dealt in government bonds. And he was sitting there, I think in the early 80s, and he was saying, you know, when the central bank, the Fed, sells bonds, we call that a monetary policy operation. When the Treasury sells bonds, we call that borrowing. And he thought to himself, but they have exactly the same impact. There is no difference in the functional impact of the central bank selling bonds or the Treasury selling bonds. What's the functional impact? They drain reserves out of the banking system. So he said, both of those really are monetary policy. Whether the Treasury sells bonds or the Fed sells bonds, it's monetary policy. It has nothing to do with borrowing. Selling bonds is not a borrowing operation. It is a monetary policy operation designed to drain reserves. Okay? So he called it IRMA, I-R-M-A, an interest rate maintenance account. Government bonds are an interest rate maintenance account. Why do you sell them? You sell them to get excess reserves out of the banks so that the interest rate doesn't fall. That's the purpose of bonds. No one had ever put it this way before. When I first heard Warren say it, you know, we were agreeing on lots of things, and then he said that. I said, wait a minute. Okay, that's bizarre. It's not a borrowing operation at all. It's an interest rate maintenance operation. But I knew the accounting, the T accounts, and I knew that what he said was right because I had done it as a student. I had a particular teacher, a guy named John Randall, who insisted we spend hour after hour after hour doing the accounting of everything you could possibly do accounting for. And we had done the accounting of that, and it was true. That's what happens when the Treasury sells bonds. Bank reserves go down. So I knew that that was right. And I think that is new. People, I mean, Randall knew, of course, that selling bonds was removing reserves, but he still called bond sales borrowing when the Treasury did it. But it's not borrowing at all. Treasuries don't borrow their own currency. They can't do it. Now, your government can issue foreign currency denominated bonds, and we call that borrowing. Okay? Brazil cannot create dollars. So if your government issues bonds denominated in dollars, I'm perfectly fine with calling that borrowing. Okay, it's not your currency. But you can't borrow your own currency. That's nonsensical. That would be like you writing an IOU to your neighbor and then trying to borrow it from them. Would that make any sense? Borrowing your own IOU. It's nonsensical. Okay? You actually can't show me a balance sheet that makes any sense where you're borrowing your own IOUs. So you can't show a Treasury balance sheet that makes any sense where the Treasury is borrowing its own currency. That's not what is going on. They can sell bonds for their own currency, but it's not borrowing. They had to put the currency there first. The reserves have to get into the banks before they can buy the bonds. There's no other way for them to buy them because the only thing that is accepted here when the Fed or Treasury sells bonds, the only thing they accept is reserves. That's it. They debit your reserves. Okay, so the reserves have to get in there first. The spending already occurred, okay, to get the reserves in the system, or the lending. There had to be spending or lending for the banks to get the reserves they use to buy the bonds. So you can't call that a borrowing operation. All it does is change their portfolio. Instead of reserves, they have bonds. Okay? Then there's another continuing horizontal part. Banks create M1, M2 when they make loans or when they buy other kinds of financial assets. We can call that a leveraging. Okay? Leveraging isn't the same thing as a money multiplier. It just means that they have to either have reserves or access to reserves when they make loans and create deposits. Why? Because they have to clear with other banks. So they're going to have reserves or have access to reserves in order to clear with other banks. So we can think of that as a leveraging. I mean, this is using the term leverage. This is the way it's always used in financial markets, right? You're leveraging the reserves you have or the reserves that you think you can give up. Yeah, that pretty much covers